This is Proditiophobia, a short story written by myself. Before we get started, I have a few quick announcements. Requests are officially closed. Those of you who have placed requests and still haven't received a story yet, those will be coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Those of you who have placed multiple requests, those second, third, or fourth, will be saved for a later date, if or when I do this again, because I am preparing to release another chapter story. I am currently in the brainstorming process, but once I finish up those prompts from everybody, I'm going to get a start up on that. Also, postings are going to be moved to Fridays instead of Thursdays. I've had a bit of a schedule change, so this will just be easier for me. It will occur at the same time of day or night. It will just be one day later. And now moving on with the story. So the request for this comes from a year ago, and I had published Autophobia, and someone had commented on YouTube asking if I was going to make a sequel. And I had no idea what I was going to do, so I said no, because I had no plans. And then suddenly 3 weeks ago, someone on Archive of Our Own commented the same thing, asking if I would make a sequel. And suddenly I had an idea. So, Yui, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, if you're still out there, I did make a sequel, and I'm sorry for not originally having a plan for one, but here is the awaited sequel to Autophobia. A brisk wind grazed Janice's face as he stepped inside the imagination. Whipping through his cape, it only served as a preview to what lay ahead. He tried to push down the rising dread in his veins and focused on the weight of Virgil's hand in his own. Not alone, he reminded himself. Never again. The look in Virgil's eyes reminded him of this. Shining violet, they reassured him that wounds could heal. Janice could fix this. A roar of thunder rejected his thoughts. Blue skies had grown dark, swirling in a sea of black and silver. The wind that appeared as a mere gust before now twisted branches and swept through the trees. Even if there were to be a sun, it could not be seen. Vines wove above the treetops so tightly, the only source of light was from each crackle of lightning. "Come on," Virgil said, tugging lightly on his hand. "You don't have much time." Janice knew he was right, though as he willed his feet to move forward, he found them stuck to the ground, frozen in fear of facing the one he wronged. Did he even deserve to speak to Remus after all he'd done? "I can't," he choked out, eyes trained on the ground. Roots shot up from the uneven soil, as if hoping to trip whoever crossed the lands. Virgil tapped Janice's chin, bringing his gaze up to meet his eyes. "It's going to be all right." He moved to brush a tear that had slipped down Janice's cheek. "I know you're afraid, but Remus needs you. Talk to him like you did to me." "But what if he doesn't want to listen? I told him horrible things, Virgil." "But you didn't mean them." Virgil squeezed their joined hands. "Recognizing your mistake is an important first part. Let him know how you feel." Janice sniffed, shrinking away from the touch. "Since when were you so adept at feelings?" "I've had a lot of time to figure out my own. Now it's your turn." The deceitful side nodded. Though his face still shone with tears, he brushed them away and started forward. Another crack of lightning flashed through the sky, though Janice pressed on. With each step upon uneven soil, he focused on the one beside him. Virgil walked in silence, though would glance over every few minutes to ensure the deceitful side was all right. Through brisk winds and twisting trees, they moved until a great structure came into sight. A tower, peaking high above the trees and reaching past the storm into the night above. Just ahead, a door to the inside stood cracked and hanging off its hinges, beckoning Janice toward it and the horrors within. They stepped past the outline of trees, a small clearing serving as the only open space around the tower. Grass lay shriveled and blackened at the base of the stones, and as Janice pushed the door open, a sour smell drifted through the air. Once inside, the chill of the forest had diminished, though that did nothing to silence the shivering down Janice's spine. Candles hung from the walls, illuminating a spiral staircase that led to the one and only room. With a nod to Virgil, they began the climb. Janice ran through endless sentences in his mind with each step upwards. For all he had done, there would never be enough words to display his guilt. He clenched his fists, ditching yet another apology that would never amount to what Remus deserved. That was just it. He had cut a wound so deep that a mere bandage would do nothing. Janice sighed, running a hand through his hair. If he wished to apologize, he would have to pour his everything into each word. It was only fair after the damage he had caused. "You all right?" Virgil slowed his pace, Janice not even caring to notice that he had fallen several steps behind. "Yes, I'm fine." "Come on, Jan. You don't have to lie." "I'm just thinking is all." Janice moved to catch up with his companion. "What if it isn't enough to make him come back? What if I'm not enough?" "You are, and you always will be," Virgil said, reading Janice's eyes. "Remember all the good things you've done. Focus on that, and things will work out." "I'll try to believe such things." Janice dropped his gaze to the floor. Round and round the concrete steps spanned, his lungs stinging with each breath. Feet aching, he pushed to reach the top, if only for the reassurance that he had tried. The final set of steps lay in front of them, dropping off onto a platform immersed in shadows. A sense of triumph filled Janice as he reached the final step, a realization that he could make it. Dread still remained in the back of his mind, however, filling his veins as another door stood before them. Something about this place was different from the rest of the tower. Thorns snaked around the space, splintering the wood and coiling tightly around stone walls. They shifted constantly, winding tighter and tighter around each space until pieces of the structure crumbled and fell to the floor. Janice gulped, turning to Virgil, who offered a reassuring glance. "Whenever you're ready," he said. "I'll be waiting here for you if you need anything." Janice nodded, though wished greatly that Virgil would accompany him. Solitude was not something he handled well, though this was his own battle. He had inflicted the wounds, and it was only fair that he healed them. Asking Virgil for his guidance would be unfair. It was best that Janice went alone. His boots clicked against the floorboards as he approached the door. The iron handle beckoned him closer, the material cool against his skin as he wrapped his fingers around the handle. A deep breath, in and out. He could do this. He had to do this. Janice pushed open the door, and a gasp was torn from his throat as he gazed upon what lay inside. Thorns, weaving through the tower tight as a tapestry, and almost pulsing as they grew. Every inch of the room was covered in the vegetation, shielding the window and allowing only a sliver of moonlight to push through. Janice stepped forward, but jumped back as something flinched under his boot. A vine withdrew from his foot, dragging across the floor and coming to rest around a figure sat in the middle of the room. Remus. The figure looked up, though he did not appear the same. His eyes glowed a bright green, and dark Dark tears left trails down his jaw. With fists clenched tight, he stared at the deceitful side. "What are you doing here?" "I just wish to speak with you." "Oh, really?" A low chuckle echoed through the room. "I'm guessing that's another one of your twisted lies." Janice inhaled deeply, pushing away the fears threatening to take him over. "Not this time, or ever again, for that matter. I came here to mend what I have broken." Remus raised an eyebrow, his eye glinting in the sliver of moonlight. He strolled forward, and with him the thorns followed. They came to wrap around his palms, swirling round and round until they were given a purpose. At the sight of the Duke, Janice tried not to crumble. The same words he had managed to banish emerged, pulsing through his mind louder than before. "Alone? He doesn't need you. Don't you see that you've lost him?" "Leave me alone," Janice hissed, squeezing his fists tight only to realize that he had been speaking out loud. Remus's grin widened, and he gained the tilt to his head he always got when serious. "Unwanted thoughts?" He circled Janice. "I've got plenty of experience with those, especially when you betrayed me. Seems my thoughts are all I have these days." "I didn't mean it, Remus. You know I never wanted to hurt you." "Liar," Remus sneered, his eyes flashing a deep green. "I'm nothing but a burden to you, to everyone. Don't pretend you could ever be trusted." "Remus, I'm sorry." "Get out." Janice's eyes widened, everything he had planned to say slipping from his brain. He opened and closed his mouth in search of anything to say, backing up as Remus shifted eerily closer. "Please," he said, wishing greatly that Virgil was here with him. It didn't matter that he had chosen to make amends. In the end, he was still left without words. "I just wanted to—" "Excuses can't save you anymore, Janice. Get out." The words crashed into Janice with points sharp as spears. His options were stretched thinner with each second, soon to disappear entirely. Rationality again threatened to slip from his mind, the panic of another bond severed filling his veins. But he wasn't going to drown in his own fears again. This time, he was not alone, and he was going to make sure of it. The temptation to sprint out the door faded, and Janice met Remus's eyes. "No." Remus stilled. "No?" "You heard me." Janice ignored the hundreds of warnings flashing through his head and stepped forward. "I was in the wrong. I hurt you, Remus, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. There are things I never should have said to you, and I'm sorry." Silence. With each passing second, Janice willed himself to stand strong, speak the truth, and mend each bit of trust he had destroyed. Remus stood frozen, the glow to his eyes reduced to a mere flicker. Within his mind, a million thoughts had to be swarming, but the creative side did nothing to show it. He stood, the vines still coiled around his arms like tendrils, the thorns having pricked his skin and left small trails of blood in its wake. Remus hadn't seemed to notice. Instead, he had begun to tremble, gritting his teeth and leveling a glare at Janice. "It's too late for apologies." "Remus, please." "I'll give you one last chance. Get out, now." "I won't leave without you." "Then you won't leave at all." Remus spoke lowly, thrusting his hands forward. From it, the vines followed, Janice serving as their main target. His eyes widened, and he scrambled to duck out of the way. Remus was too quick. Thorns pierced his ankles and wrists and Janice cried out, colliding hard with the floor. He dug his nails into the wooden floorboards as he was dragged forward, each moment of resistance causing the thorns to dig deeper into his skin. With a flick of Remus's hand, Janice was sent flying across the room. He winced as he struck the wall, slumping to the floor with hot tears now stinging his eyes. "How does it feel now?" Remus stood before him, scowling. "How does it feel for the one you care about to crush you in mere moments?" "I didn't mean to." "That's not the question." Remus closed his fist, and the vines tightened. Janice bit back a cry, hanging his head if only to avoid the gaze of his old friend. "Do you, or do you not feel it eating at your core? Every inch of trust you had, gone, just like that." "Yes," Janice said hoarsely. "Good. Remember how this feels, to be betrayed by the only one you had left. Maybe next time you'll think before casting me out." Thrusting his hand out, Remus commanded a final vine. It snapped through the air with emerald tendrils. Janice's eyes widened, and he struggled to pull away with no avail. The vine curled around his neck, winding dangerously tighter. "No," Janice choked, straining against the pull of thorns to grasp at the vine. "Remus, don't do this." Remus narrowed his eyes. "You've had enough second chances. Now I'll make sure you never hurt anyone else." With each second, the vine coiled tighter, stealing the precious breaths Janice desperately needed. He gasped for air, though Remus showed no hint of worry. Anger and sorrow had wiped away his only rationality. "Remus, I'm sorry. It was wrong for me to let my temper take over, but I need you to listen." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not, I swear." Janice's vision began to grow fuzzy, and with it, his remaining air reduced to a mere gasp. His fingers twitched in a final attempt to loosen the vines, unsuccessful in their attempt. "Please, you can trust me." Remus glared at him. "Do you really think I'll believe a word you say?" Darkness enveloped Janice's vision as he felt his eyelids drooping. He fought to keep them open, though each shallow breath left his mind fading to nothing. He met Remus's eyes one last time, mouthing 3 words as his eyes slipped closed. "I miss you." The world grew dark, and Janice was again alone. Something about the thought brought him to peace. Maybe this had been what he deserved. The thing he feared most served as his final end, and something about it emerged to be poetic. His consciousness began to vanish, and Janice allowed it, for there was nothing to mock him when he could no longer think. "Stop!" The voice rang out from the other side of the room, just loud enough to spark Janice's attention. He blinked, straining to shake himself from the void and catch a glimpse of who had come. Again, the sound came, sharp and darkened. "Let go of him, Remus." Virgil. Janice nearly fell apart at the realization. He had come for him. "What are you doing here?" Remus's voice wavered. "You left us. You're supposed to be with the light sides." "Things change," he said. "Now snap out of it and let go." Let go, Remus." The vines receded, and Janice slumped to the floor, gasping for air. He braced himself on his forearms, coughing as his lungs were again filled. Each precious breath was saved, a sharp sting lingering in his throat, but a wonder compared to before. The clacking of floorboards sounded as Virgil rushed to his side, setting a hand on his back as Janice fell into a coughing fit. "It's all right," he said. "You're okay. Just breathe." Virgil looked up to Remus, who stood frozen. "What were you thinking?" You came back. Why would you do such a thing? You could have killed him, Remus." The Duke's eyes widened, the glow replaced by a growing concern. He began to tremble. "I'm sorry." His gaze shifted over to Janice, who remained doubled over on the ground. Remus broke down. As he dropped to the ground, the vines shriveled and thorns receded until only he was left in the center of the room. Moonlight again shone through the windows, and it was just enough to illuminate the tears that flowed down his face. Janice raised his head slowly, able to bring himself into a sitting position. He reached out. "Remus." Remus buried his face in his hands, muttering frantically through his fingers. "What did I do? I didn't mean to. I didn't mean it. I shouldn't have listened to them. I shouldn't." "I'm all right, Remus. I'm right here." Janice placed a hand on the Duke's shoulder, and he whirled around with tears streaking his face. "You're bleeding. Oh, God, I did that." He held his hand hesitantly over Janice, wincing at the sight of blood trickling from where the thorns had pricked. "I wasn't thinking. You told me to leave, and I was angry and miserable and scared." "Hey, just breathe." Janice squeezed Remus's shoulder. "In and out. Take your time." I could have... Janice, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "We both made mistakes, but we can work to mend them." He nodded towards Virgil, who offered a reassuring smile. "Take a moment to breathe. It'll be all right." He counted aloud, allowing Remus to process when to inhale and exhale. His frantic breath slowly leveled until he was left sitting in silence. Janice met his eyes, taking a breath of his own before forming the right words. "I apologize for all the things I said, and I promise that I would never unintentionally betray your trust. You're my best friend, Remus. I really don't know what I'd do without you." Remus sighed, leaning onto Janice's shoulder. "I missed you so much. I thought you didn't want me to come back, and I'm sorry for hurting you. My thoughts, I should have never let them take over." "It happens sometimes, but the best thing to do is try and focus on what's really there. Virgil helped remind me of that." "And you're going to stay?" Remus met Virgil's eyes. "Not forever, but you'll come see us?" "Of course." A smile reached his lips, and he surged forward to wrap his arms around the two. "Thank you," Remus whispered. "I promise, I'll be better." "We can all work to be better, but for now, let's get some bandages. I think Janice may need some antiseptic." "That would be preferred." Janice offered a shaky laugh, standing up with the help of Virgil. He winced at the movement, and Remus cast him a worried glance. "You sure you're okay?" "Nothing some hot tea and first aid can't fix." "I'm so sorry." "Don't worry." Janice moved to walk alongside Remus. "All that matters is that we move forward and do our best to improve." Remus nodded, and with that, they descended the tower. Both Virgil and Remus helped to get Janice down the stairs, their sighs of relief echoing through the space when they finally reached the bottom. The path back no longer swarmed with twisting trees and bitter winds, instead sprouting green grass where barren land had once existed. Birds replaced the crackling of thunder, while skies again became blue. No longer was anyone alone. No longer did anyone feel betrayed or cast out. Though there were still holes to patch up, it was a start, and a brilliant one at that. Janice found enough peace to grin then. The shouts of his mind quieted to a mere whisper. He was sure Remus felt similarly, as the glint to his eye had been replaced with a gentle smile. Hands interlocked, the three exchanged a hopeful glance, and with a click, the door to the imagination was opened. That day, three had entered broken, but as they emerged, something had healed. And from it came a family unlike no other, one that may wear through trials, but never again to break. This has been Proditiophobia. Thank you to both the people who asked about a sequel to Autophobia and spurred on this wonderful idea. Thank you to all of you listening right now, and I will see you next time for another story.